On this episode of Strength Coach Tutorials, I'm going to show you how to create this dynamic chart that comes equipped with a scroll bar that can be used to scroll the dates of the data, as well as spin buttons that are used to add more data points or subtract more data points, and drop-down menus where you can select the athlete that you want to look at. This is going to be a really powerful tool if you're building any kind of athlete dashboards or monitoring systems and you wanted to have full control of your data and be able to display it easily. So let's get after it. Okay, so here we are, and we're starting with a blank sheet. The only thing that I've done to go ahead and start the process is I've just added a box up here where we're going to add our athlete name, and then another box underneath where we're going to add our start date. Now, just to set the stage here, for your reference, what you need to know is this is the table that we're going to be dealing with, and it has two athletes in here, athlete 1 and athlete 2, and then it'll have the date that they performed the monitoring, and then the stress out of 5, the mood out of 5, and the sleep out of 5. And the reference for this table is TBL_wellness. So when we're referencing that table throughout the formulas, that's what we're going to do. So the first way, or the first thing that we have to do in starting this process is pull out the data based on the athlete that we select. So we're going to do the drop-down menu for the athletes first, and an easy way to do that is I'm just going to use a unique function. So I'll type equals unique, and this is only available in the newer Excel versions, but I'll type in equals unique, and then it's going to ask me what I want to pull out. I'm going to say TBL_wellness, and then square brackets, athlete name, close the square brackets, close the whole thing off, and it's going to give me my two athletes. So I'm going to do my drop down menu first. I'll go back to athlete name, go to data validation, and I'm going to create a list, and then the source, I'm going to select the first cell for that unique function. And if you've watched any of my videos recently, we've been dealing a lot in spilled and dynamic arrays. And to reference those, all I have to do is put a hashtag at the end of this value, and that is going to say that we want to reference the whole dynamic array. Hit OK, and we should be able to select either of those names. So then step 2 is now we actually have to pull out the data for that athlete. So if you remember back to our data table, we have stress, mood, and sleep. So I'm going to pull those values out. So we're going to start with date, and then stress, mood, and sleep. And the first thing that we want to pull out is all of the date values. So we'll start with a filter function, and we're going to filter it by the athlete name. So what this is going to look like is we'll put equals filter, and then the array that we want is TBL_wellness, and then the date, and then comma, and then what do we want to include? We want to include all of them where TBL_wellness, athlete name equals the athlete name that we have selected, and I'm going to lock that in by pressing F4, and that is going to put $signs around that because that is always where I'm going to be referencing the athlete name. And then if empty, I'm just going to leave that blank and then close that all off. And you can see what it's done. It's pulled all those values out, albeit it's formatted them as a number. So I can just select a bunch of these cells here, and I'm just going to format those as a date. So I'll go back to home and then select short date. Now, this is great, except for you can see here we have an anomaly in our data, and we could clean it up in the actual table, but I'm going to make sure that that doesn't happen. So what I'm going to do is wrap this in a sort function. So I'm going to go back to my filter, and I'm going to type sort, wrap that up, and then a comma at the end, and then another bracket. And what that's going to do is sort all the data so that now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 for all of our dates. And that's just an easy way to make sure that all of our dates sort of reference or kind of are in order and for what we want. So now it's just about pulling out the sleep, mood, and stress data. So let's start with the stress. And for this, we're going to use a function called average ifs. And we're using the average ifs function because we know that we're not going to have more than one piece of data per date. If we were, we might want to pull out the max or the minimum, or we might want to pull out the average from that date. So you could use max ifs, min ifs, or average ifs. So what this is going to look like is I'll type equals average ifs, and then it's going to ask me the average range that I want, TBL underscore wellness, and we're looking for stress, and I'll close that off, and then it's going to ask me my criteria. The first criteria that I want is TBL underscore wellness, athlete name, and then comma is equal to the athlete name that we have selected. Again, I'm going to lock that in with B3, and then my second criteria is going to be TBL underscore wellness, date, comma is equal to the date that we have already pulled out. So I'm going to go to D3 and I'm going to lock that in. As well, I'm going to put the hashtag, and you can see as soon as I've added that hashtag, it's selected all of the cells, and then I'm going to close this off, and it's going to reference all of the stress values all the way down. So we can use this same formula. I'm just going to copy it, escape out of this, and I will paste it under mood. And now instead of stress, we will turn it into mood. And then I'll do the same thing again. Instead of stress again, now we want sleep. So how this formula works is it's asking us what is the actual range that we want to reference, and then it's giving us our criteria. So criteria range, athlete name matches B3, which is where we pulled out our athlete, and then table wellness date matches our dates that we've already pulled out. So now we have all of our data, and just to be sure that that's working properly, I'll switch the name, and you can see that all of my data updates accordingly. So now it's about pulling out the amount of data that we actually want. And to do this, we're going to use an offset function and a spin button. We're going to do the spin button first. So I'm going to go to the developer tab. And if you don't have the developer tab, you can turn that tab on under the file menu, and you would go down to options, and there's an option in there to turn on the developer tab. But for right now, we're going to go to insert, and I'm going to select this one here, spin button form control, and I'm going to paste one of those on my screen here. Right click there, format control. The minimum value that I ever want it to have is going to be 1. The maximum value is going to be the maximum amount of plot or points that we want on our chart. So I would say probably 50 is enough for what I want. And then the cell link is where we're actually going to paste that value. So I'm just going to put it underneath where my start date is going to be and hit enter. And as you watch, what this is going to do, if you watch this value here, as I click the spin button, it's just going to sequentially count up and then sequentially count down. And if we wanted to move things by the week, we could easily change this to 7, and then it would incrementally count up in 7s. So you see how that works, but we're just going to use kind of one at a time. So that's where we're going to store that value. And then the next thing that I need to do is actually pick a start date. So for now, our start date is just going to be equal to the first date that we've pulled out from our actual filter formula. I'll move this just over a little bit. And now we're going to start to set up our offset formula. So how the offset formula works, we're going to type equals offset, open that up, and it's going to ask us what the actual reference that we want is. And for us, that's going to be the first day of our filter. We're going to lock that in D3. And then it's going to ask us how many rows we actually want. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a match function here. So it looks like this, match. And then we want B5, which is where we've stored our date. So we want to match that value. Okay. Lock that in. And the lookup array we want to look it up in our date table, and I'll lock that in with the hashtag and the dollar signs. And then we want an exact match. Whoops. Sorry. We want an exact match, so 0. And then we're going to have to add a -1 here because we want to select the first one. So what it's going to be doing is it's going to be going through here and counting down 1. So the first one it finds is actually going to be in the two row. So we're actually going to give it just a -1 to clean up that data. And then it's going to ask me what column I want. So how many columns I want to move over, and I don't want to move any over, so I'm going to just ignore this. And then it's going to ask me what the height that I want this to be is. And the height is how many cells I actually want it to count. So we're going to use our spin button for that. So where we've referenced our spin button, and I'm going to lock that in with dollar signs. And then it's going to ask me the width, and I only want this to be 1 column wide. And then I'm going to close this down, and you can see it's referenced that value. I'm just going to turn these back into dates and show you how this works. So as I add 1 to the spin button, you can see that it just sequentially counts up 1 value. And then as I take 1 away, it starts to take them away. So that's how we're going to set up this function. And I'm going to copy this now. And the cool thing is we can use this same function over, and the only thing we have to change is where it says columns. If I put a 1 in there, it's going to tell it that I want it to move over 1 column. And now it's going to reference the stress, and as we count it, because everything else is referenced the same, they're both going to count at the same time. And I'm going to do that one more time. So I'm going to take that offset function, and I'm going to paste it, and now instead of 1, I want it to move 2 columns over. Hit OK, and I'll do it one last time. And now instead of 1, I want it to move 3 columns over. So now we have it referencing the date, 1 column over for the stress, another column over for the mood, and then the final column over for the sleep. And as I count it up, it counts up, and as I count it down, it counts down. Now, in order to use these formulas in a chart, we have to create a chart first. So I'm just going to make a big kind of square box here where we can put our chart into. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a named range out of these. So the cool thing about this offset function is I can actually use it to create a named range. So how this is going to work is I'm going to copy this formula, and then I'll go to Formulas, Name Manager, and we're going to define a new name, and we're going to call this one Date. And I'm going to just paste that formula right in there as is, and because we've locked everything the way we want, it's going to work. And then I'll hit OK, and then what I'll do is I'll copy the next one, and I'll define a new name, and we're going to call that Stress, and I'll paste that formula in there and hit OK. And then I'll copy the next one, and you can see where I'm going with this. And I'll define a new name. We'll call this one Mood. And I will paste that formula in there, hit OK. And then the final one, copy that, define a new name, and we will call it Sleep. And I will paste that in there and hit OK. Okay. And then I'm not going to need these formulas anymore, so I'm just going to move them kind of down below the chart so that they're out of the way. Now, if we want to check that our formulas are working, what I can do over here is I could type equals date, and it's going to put that value in, equals stress. It's going to put that value in, equals mood, and then equals sleep. Hit OK. And if I can still see those, I can't really see them, so I'll just zoom out one. But keep an eye on these values here. As we hit this spin button, you can see that it's still working. Even though it's referenced as a named range, it's still going to keep adding to those. So those are what we're going to use to actually make our chart. So the next step is I'm going to select this area from my chart, and I'll go to Insert, and I'm going to insert a line chart with markers. And it gives me this square here, and if I hold down Alt, I can make that snap to grid. So I'm going to snap that all the way to the grid, and then right click on my chart and pick select data, and we're going to start to add some data series. So the first one we're going to add, we'll go to series values, and the easy way to do this is just select anywhere, select the whole thing and then select anywhere on your actual, why is that doing that? Okay, select anywhere, and it's going to give you this value here. It just says the name of your sheet and then the cell value. We just want to delete that cell value and now type in stress, which is the named range that we gave it, and hit enter, and it's already added a series for us. For our series name, we'll just make it reference where we've typed in stress and hit OK. We'll do that 2 more times. So series name for this one's going to be mood, and then we'll just highlight this and select a cell, and it keeps giving me this +1, so I'll just delete that. And where it gives me the actual cell, we'll delete that, type in mood, hit OK, and then we'll add one more. The series name is going to be sleep, so we'll select that cell, and then the series value is going to be sleep, and hit OK. So there's our 3 kind of lines, and then we'll do the same thing on the horizontal axis. I'll go to edit, and the label range, I'll just select a cell, and instead of that, we'll type in date. Now hit OK. So there's our chart, and we know that these values are going to be out of 5, so I'm just going to right click on the axis and format it, and I'm just going to make it 5.5 so that we can have a little room on the top, and then I'll close this down. So as we use our spin button now, you can see that we are actually adding values to our chart, and I think that looks pretty cool. And as we use the spin button, we are taking away values from our chart. And the reason that I used a line chart with the markers is that without the markers, when we go down to only one value, you wouldn't see anything. It would just look like the chart is blank, but when we use the markers, we can still see those. So then the next thing that I want to show you how to do is actually add that scroll bar from the intro video. So we'll go back to our developer tab and go to insert, and there's an option to add a scroll bar, and I'll just put that on top here. And it works much the same way as the spin button. So what we're going to do is right click on it and hit format control, and I'm going to give it a maximum value of 50, minimum value of 1, counts up by 1, and the cell link for it, we'll just put it sort of underneath over here, and I'll hit enter. And you can see now, as I scroll it, what's going to happen is it is actually going to change the number over here. And as I scroll it down, it's going to change the number. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this to our start date so that our offset function continues to look for one date further down and would take, say if we were looking at 5 cells. So I'll show you how this works. So if we're looking at 5 cells, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right now it's looking at 1 to 5, so it's looking at these 5. But if I was to change the start date to say 3/2/2020, we would look at these 5, and then 3/3 we'd look at these 5, and so on and so forth. So the way that we can do this is we could just do a simple plus, this plus function that our scroll bar shows, and that would work fine. And you can see that it's scrolling along, but what happens when we get to the end, it's just going to show all 0 values, and it gives us kind of an error. So I'm going to put a function in there to not show those 0 values. So how this is going to work is actually, instead of D3 plus B7, I'm going to go equals if, open that up as an actual formula, and if this plus this is less than max and the dates that we have, and we'll just lock that in, comma, then what I want you to actually show is that plus that. So what we're doing is, as long as the adding them both together is less than the maximum value out of these selected dates, then it's okay. Go ahead and add them and show me that value. But if it's not, comma, then what I want you to show me is actually the max value. So essentially what we're doing is creating a formula that if we get to the max value, it just stays there and it won't go any higher. So when I hit enter, what you'll see with our scroll bar is I'll get to the end of this. I'll scroll it kind of all the way across. And our last date is 4/9/2020. And as I keep scrolling, the biggest date that we get is 4/9/2020, and we can't scroll it any larger than that. But if we keep scrolling it down, as we get back into actual values, it will keep scrolling. Okay, so that is how you create the scroll bar and the spin buttons for your dynamic graph. If we wanted to, we could just clean this up a little bit. I could add, I could go right click, change chart type, and then I have a template that would just make it look a little nicer. I could select that one and it cleans it up. Maybe delete the data labels and the title because I don't really need that. And then what I can do is take this scroll bar, and I think this looks really cool when we do this. Take this scroll bar and maybe I copy it, or I move it so it's on top of the chart. And then I would send the chart to the back. So I can select somewhere on the chart and put send to back. So it's going to put it behind everything. And then we can take the spin button and put it sort of at the top of the chart. So it looks like these are controls for the chart and they sit on top of the chart. And you can see how that would work. And then we have all this extra data sitting around on our sheet. We could do these calculations on another sheet if we wanted to. Or another easy thing to do, I'll show you two things we could do. So if I right click on this chart, I can go down to select data, hidden and empty cells. I can select that I want it to show data in a hidden cell, and it'll hit OK. And then what I can do is actually take these cells and right click, hide them. And now it's going to show the data regardless. Actually, in this case, that wouldn't matter because the data is coming from the formulas and not from those cells. But in another case, that would matter. But in this case, it doesn't actually matter. So I'll show you one other way that we can get rid of all the data on our sheet. So we have all this data underneath, including this athlete names and the spin button counters. All I want to do here is maybe I select all of these, go back to home. And if I just change the font color to white, we can't see it anymore. And it still lives on our sheet and it's still there, but it just cleans the whole sheet up a little bit. So if I were to select all these cells and maybe change that font color to white, you can see now everything sort of disappears and it cleans up the whole sheet, but all of our spin buttons and stuff still work. So I hope this trick helps you out and gets you thinking a little bit more creatively about how you might want to visualize some of the data that you're collecting. If you have any comments or questions, just post them down in the comments below and I will try to get back to you. And if you did find any value in this video, I'd really like it if you could share it on social media or reach out to me or follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, at DSMStrength. I'll type that on the screen now. So DSMStrength. And you can find me on any social media at that name. And then I will see you in the next video. So thanks for watching.